in order to do something great, you still must have this chaos inside of you. You have to be able to have this inner war, this inner fight with yourself, because to be comfortable, to be able to sit there and just be okay with where you are means that you're never ever going to be able to do anything more than what you've already done. And you are capable of so much more than you can possibly even realize at this moment. I don't care who the hell you are who's listening to this right now. You are capable of so much more. Welcome back to our introduction on Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Today we're looking at Prologue 5. If you remember from last time, Prologue 4, it ends with Zarathustra talking to the crowd and explaining to them the kind of person that we should aspire to become in his view. The person who is self-sacrificing to give way to the higher being that comes after us. In a very personal sense, he's talking about you, me, who can sacrifice today what we are for what we could possibly become in the future. In the broader sense, he's talking about modern humans who can give way to something greater in the future, a higher form of ourselves. Remember, he's writing in contrast to the modernists of his time who believed that human evolution had kind of hit its peak with modern humans. And so from there, it's just a matter of fine-tuning what we presently are. Nietzsche didn't believe that. He believed that we still had some more evolutionary steps to take to become better. And so the person who's willing to kind of sacrifice ourselves now to pave the way for that greater person later on is the person to be admired, to be esteemed. Again, there's kind of like a parallel there between John the Baptist, who says that he's not the Messiah, but that he's kind of giving way to the Messiah who's going to come after him, who's Jesus. In the same way, we give way for what we are today to what could become later, what's coming after us, the better version of us, kind of like the real article, the real McCoy. So with paragraph 1, we begin. When Zarathustra had spoken these words, he again looked at the people and was silent. There they stand, he said to his heart. There they laugh. They do not understand me. I am not the mouth for these ears. One must first smash their ears, that they may learn to hear with their eyes. So the people are laughing at Zarathustra after he gives this speech about what we should aspire to become. Now, this angers Zarathustra, not because they're laughing at him. Throughout the whole book, Zarathustra oftentimes makes fun of himself. There's some self-deprecating humor there. But self-mocking, that requires a certain level of intelligence because it means that you have to be able to examine yourself and see the follies. You're going to find that highly intelligent people are oftentimes able to laugh at themselves. People who are not so smart aren't often able to laugh at themselves. Also, it takes a high level of esteem to laugh at yourself because you're opening yourself up to criticism and you're acknowledging obvious criticisms about yourself. And people who lack esteem or people who have unconfident people, we'll say it that way, people who are unconfident do not like to be laughed at. This is why, as Eric Hoffer said, we should treat the tyrants with mockery. We should make fun of them because that's the thing that brings tyrants down. Tyrants cannot stand mockery. You look throughout history, Stalin and Hitler and these Pol Pot, Castro, these folks cannot handle any criticism towards themselves, and especially mockery. So if you want to bring down a tyrant, we got to learn how to make fun of them. So Zarathustra, he's not a tyrant, and he's a very intelligent person, and he has esteem, so he's not really worried about the laughing at him. But what angers him is that the crowd is exhibiting stupidity. It's not that they're making fun of him again, it's that they're stupid. They don't understand what he's saying, but in their stupidity, they're laughing. That's what bothers him so much. So he continues, one must clatter like kettle drums and preachers of repentance. In other words, do I have to put on a show and yell at you? Remember, right before that he said he had to smash their ears so that they could see what was going to become of them. So he's asking, must one clatter like kettle drums and preachers of repentance? Or do they only believe the stammerer? They have something of which they are proud. What do they call it? That which makes them proud. Education, they call it. It distinguishes them from the goatherds. So he points out that the crowd is not just stupid. They're intelligent in the sense that they have education, but they're stupid in the sense of their ability to understand. Let's not confuse education with intelligence. Let's not even confuse intelligence with wisdom. These three are all very different things. You can be very intelligent and not wise. You can be very educated and be very stupid. If you're very fortunate, or I should say fortunate, if you work very hard in your life, you can become educated, intelligent, and wise. But that last part requires experience. You have to live life. You can't just stare at books. And so that last part from paragraph 1 where he says, must one first smash their ears that they may learn to hear with their eyes? First, I'm going to have to smash them so that they can see what the final end of their present life is going to be. And you're also going to see that this thing of education, it's very easy for us to kind of put this down, and say, I don't need a piece of paper to say how smart I am. Oh, okay, well, do you need a sense of accomplishment to point how smart you are? I don't know what people are looking for when they say, I don't need blank to tell me how smart I am. At the end, that isn't to say that education makes you smart. It makes you, makes you knowledgeable for sure. That's hardly beyond dispute. But it's more than just that. When you'll find oftentimes that people who disparage education, it's out of a sense of a lack of self-esteem. They know that they don't have education. And then people who do have it, and I mean that in the sense of having degrees and pieces of paper, oftentimes they like to lord that over people. Remember, Nietzsche was a full professor by the time he was 23. He walks away from it. He does not think that the university is the proper place to explore ideas. He thinks it's too stale and stagnant. People aren't challenging each other. There's too much status quo. So when he puts down education, it's not because he, dropped out of school in the 8th grade or something like that. Nietzsche is incredibly educated, and incredibly smart, and incredibly wise. He's all of the things that he was espousing in the previous section, Prologue 4. So he continues in paragraphs 3 and 4. Therefore, the crowd, they, dislike to hear the word contempt applied to themselves. So I will appeal to their pride. I will speak to them of the most contemptible thing, that is, the last man. So remember, he's got this idea of the individual versus the herd, and the herd gives way to ultimately the last man, which is the opposite of everything that the Übermensch is, opposite of everything that the Superman is. The last man is the person who's comfort-seeking, who refuses to take risks, and because they're comfort-seeking and refuse to take risks, they will never be able to accomplish anything great. The trade-off, as we're going to see, is that we get nihilism. It's this leveling tendency where everything is the same. Nobody is any better or worse off than anyone else, and you can see a lot of that moving through the spirit of our age today. Whether or not that's the right way to go, I leave it to you to determine. But quite clearly for Nietzsche, he is not a fan of this last man, as we're going to see in the following section. So here's Zarathustra goes to shock the crowd. If you don't pay attention to me, here's what you're going to become. So thus spoke Zarathustra to the people. It is time for man to set a goal for himself. It is time for man to plant the seed of his highest hope. His soil is still rich enough for it, but that soil will one day be poor and exhausted, and no lofty tree will any longer be able to grow on it. Alas, there will come a time when man will no longer launch the arrow of his longing beyond man, and the string of his bow will have an unlearned to whir. I say to you, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. I love that, man. I say to you, you still have chaos in yourself. Alas, there will come a time when man can no longer give birth to any star. Alas, there will come the time of the most despicable man who can no longer despise himself. Behold, I show you the last man. So one of the things that stands out about this section is that while Zarathustra is about to just spank the crowd, notice he begins with this incredible hope, which a lot of people don't associate with Nietzsche. But man, the guy, the guy's an optimist. He begins by saying, your soil is still rich, But one day that soil may be poor and exhausted, and no longer will any tree be able to grow on it, or no lofty tree will be able to grow on it. He's not just going to spank the crowd and say, you're all a bunch of pieces of garbage. He's saying, dude, you can still change. This can still happen, but the time will come if we continue on our present path. He's trying to warn us. He's not trying to condemn us. He's pointing out that this last man is contemptible, because the crowd would hate to be called contemptible. So he's trying to appeal to them at the emotional level, not just to manipulate them, but my God, he loves humanity. And we don't oftentimes get that sense from Nietzsche when we, at least not in the ways that we portray him. We think of him as like this, non-sympathetic, non-empathetic, hater of humanity. Far from it, man. This guy is like pleading with his words. He's saying, I say to you, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. In order to do something great, you still must have this chaos inside of you. You have to be able to have this inner war, this inner fight with yourself, because to be comfortable, to be able to sit there and just be okay with where you are means that you're never ever going to be able to do anything more than what you've already done. And you are capable of so much more than you can possibly even realize at this moment. I don't care who the hell you are who's listening to this right now. You are capable of so much more, as long as you still have that chaos inside of yourself. The problem is that we settle for comfort and we settle into life. And that doesn't mean that if you have a great job and a wonderful family and all of these things that are worthwhile, admirable goals in life, that you can't therefore be anything except for just comfortable. You can be so much more. You can still have that desire inside of yourself to drive on and become something greater. Now, Nietzsche doesn't exactly say this here, but maybe it's worth considering that you could still find yourself becoming a better parent, or a better employee, or a better whatever it is that you're doing in life. But the moment that you sit there and say like, oh, I can't, of course not with that attitude. I'm too old to, start mountain climbing. Well, at that point, then you're never going to be a mountain climber. You no longer have chaos inside of you, so you can no longer give birth to that dancing star. We have to get rid of this idea that comfort is a thing to be cherished. And that's the problem, is that comfort is so alluring. As I talked about in another video, if the meaning and purpose of your life was in bed, in a warm bed, comfortable bed, I promise you, you would have found it by now, because you spent a lot of time hiding in your comfortable warm bed, but not enough time exploring the world, and certainly not enough time exploring the chaos that's in your soul. And so he continues, paragraph 10, alas, there will come a time. So again, he's warning us, it's not yet, but there will come a time when man can no longer give birth to any star. Alas, there will come the time of the most despicable man who can no longer despise himself. And that inability to despise yourself is important. Now, Nietzsche, of course, is in an extreme here where he says you've got to be willing to just despise and hate yourself, because maybe that's the thing that's going to motivate you. Maybe that's you sitting on the couch thinking, I'm just a lump of crap sitting here staring at a television screen, covered in Cheeto dust. I could be so much more than this. Or at the very least, I could just be not such a lump of crap sitting on a couch covered in Cheeto dust looking for entertainment. Instead, I could be out there doing something with my life, because again, entertainment is largely a distraction from life. That's its purpose. So the more entertained you are, sure, the more comfortable your life is, and you might feel like it's, the more enjoyable your life is. But I promise you, man, that life is passing you by. I promise you that life is passing you by. Think back to the last time that you were so entertained. If you're sitting on that couch watching television, you're thinking like, wow, this is a really good show. When's the last time that you were so entertained? It's probably completely gone from your memory. But I don't know, man. Maybe that last time you went rock climbing and you thought you were too old to do it, or too young to do it. Maybe that's the thing that's actually memorable to you. Maybe that's the thing that stands out to you. I don't know, man. It's up for everybody to decide for themselves. But I wonder if, at the end of it all, a worthwhile, meaningful life is more full of of rock climbing and surfing and jiu-jitsu or whatever, or if it's more full of sitting on the couch covered in Cheeto dust. So here we go. He's going to tell us about this last man, the person who's incapable of despising themselves, the person who's incapable of analyzing themselves, and therefore is incapable of becoming great. He begins paragraph 12. What is love? Don't sing it. Paragraph 12. What is love? What is creation? What is longing? What is a star? So asks the last man and blinks. In other words, the last man is asking himself these deep questions, and he doesn't understand them, and he just kind of like, I don't know. Let me just go back to my television. Paragraph 13 continues. The earth has then become small, and on it there hops the last man who makes everything small. His race is ineradicable as the flea. The last man lives longest. We have invented happiness, says the last man, and they blink. They have left the regions where it was hard to live, for one needs warmth. One still loves one's neighbor and rubs up against him, for one needs warmth. Becoming ill and being distrustful, they consider sinful. One proceeds carefully. He is a fool who still stumbles over stones or men. So this last person, again, is characterized by comfort, the desire to be comfortable. Now, he points out in paragraph 13 that the earth has become small to this person. In other words, they don't explore. They never leave their hometown. Maybe they never leave their mom's basement. I'm sure we know people like this. His race is ineradicable as the flea, however. They're so comfortable that they live a very, very safe life. These are people who are not falling off of the sides of mountains or I don't know, getting hit by cars as they go out for jogs or whatever. And I know that we'll look at that sometimes and go, wow, that's good, safe, nice and safe. And you're going to notice that safety is almost like the god of our time, that we prize and we cherish safety. We'll do outrageous things in the name of an abundance of caution, we'll say. And if you're incredibly cautious, you never get a chance to live. I mean, you can take that to an extreme. You can never travel because, airplanes fall out of the sky once every, decade or so. I know, more often than that, but you get the idea. You can't really travel by car because we get into car accidents. And, I was going to go somewhere yesterday, but I don't know. I mean, it was raining pretty heavy, so I decided to stay home because it was raining and, it's dangerous to travel in the rain. If safety is our God, then our temple is our home. We never want to leave it. We're going to stay exactly where we are, and that means we're never going to be able to experience anything meaningful in life. And then that means we're never going to be able to accomplish anything meaningful in life. And that doesn't mean that you have to become the CEO of some multi-billion-dollar corporation, although that's probably the second god of our time. But instead, it means that you're never going to be able to go outside of your comfort zone. You're never going to be able to leave your house. And again, if the meaning and purpose of your life was in your warm bed, I promise you would have found it by now. If it was on your couch, somewhere there between the cushions, I imagine you probably would have found it by now. But it's not there. And so that tells you that maybe we need to leave those places. And he says that the race is as ineradicable as the flea. Say that 5 times fast. In other words, we live long. So paragraph 14, we have invented happiness, says the last man, and they blink. It's like, wow, we've achieved such a level of comfort that no one before has ever lived like us. And my goodness, I hear that all the time now. We say, the world is so different from what it was 15 years ago. Why? And then the answer is, well, technology. And then we all just kind of nod and go, oh, yeah, technology. We've always had technology. Technology isn't anything new. Technology, at least not in how we use it. Like the printing press was technology. Maybe we might mean like, the internet. Okay, so the internet does change things. The speed of communication does change things. But we just talk about technology as though technology has never existed before. What's existed for long before us is us, human beings. We've been around for a very long time. And we have a bunch of new communication tools, but that just means it amplifies the ways in which we communicate. The human condition hasn't changed. There's nothing new under the sun. So we talk about, how today we've invented happiness because we have air conditioning and heaters. We have cars and we have, the internet, and we can shop online. We don't have to leave the house even to go shopping. My lights do that. We don't have to leave the house to go shopping. We can just shop from the comfort of our couch, again, covered in Cheeto dust in our mom's basements. And we look at the past and go, my goodness, can you believe that people 100 years ago had to walk? Can you believe that they didn't have email? They had to write letters? And I don't know, man, what did we find 100 years ago? People who were in way better shape and people who were literate and could read and understand more of the world around them. But again, if comfort is kind of the thing that we're perpetually seeking, yeah, we're going to live a long life because we're not going to be out, doing stuff. But by the way, having said that, the long life that we're probably going to live is going to be from consuming pharmaceuticals. It certainly won't be because our hearts are stronger. It's because we have medicines that will make your heart go a little bit longer. Although if you look at the life expectancy of the past couple hundred years, not much has changed. If you take infant mortality out of the equation, we live around the same amount of time as before, except that we have a lot of pharmaceuticals that counteract this life of comfort that we pursue. So he continues in paragraph 15. They have left the regions where it was hard to live. It's too difficult to live over there. We need warmth. One still loves one's neighbor and rubs against him, for one needs warmth. I'm gonna leave that one as it is. Becoming ill and being distrustful, they consider sinful. So to become sick, in the sense of, I guess leave it at that. Becoming sick, we take it to be this horrible thing. And let me say it nicely. I know, now I'm considering being nice about it. But Nietzsche would point out that, think about today. You get a little bit of pain in your shoulder, what do? We grab ibuprofen. You get a little bit of a headache, what do? We grab Tylenol. I have some trouble sleeping, what do? I grab some Tylenol, or ibuprofen PM. I have a problem with my foot, I immediately go online and find out, what's wrong with it. WebMD tells me it's cancer. But we have like a little scratch on there, so now we have ointments and things to take away the pain. At the sign of any little pain, we almost feel like we have a right to live without pain. And so much of our pharmaceutical industry is geared towards exactly that, alleviating pain. We can look at the opioid epidemic now and scratch our chins and be like, wow, how did this happen? Well, it's no different from the drug epidemics of the 60s and 70s and 80s. Today we're trying to relieve physical pain. Back then, people are, of course, taking drugs are trying to relieve emotional pain, psychological pain. And so today we have people using opioids to try to eradicate all of those things. Of course, we have physical pain. Look, we don't exercise, we don't eat right, and so surprise, surprise, our bodies take a big dump on us, and then we, wonder why we don't have, why our mental state isn't such a problem. Why is there so much mental illness today? And I understand people will say because we diagnose it more. Even if we account for those things, we have more of it today than we've ever had. It's not just because people are more willing to see therapists, although that is a big part of it. And of course, this causes a shortage of therapists. But it's because we don't have a meaning. We don't have purpose. We aren't out trying to accomplish great things. In fact, oftentimes today when we see people who accomplish great things, we turn on them. We hate them. We see Elon Musk and we disagree with something he says, but what really pisses us off is that he's this incredible billionaire, the wealthiest person in the world. And then we celebrate when he loses a bunch of money, as though somehow any of that money trickles back into our pockets. And then we hate him because he's successful. As I said in a previous video, we hate it when our friends become successful. That is unless they, kick a few dollars down our way. But we don't go out, we don't achieve, therefore we have a great deal of mental strain. We're not exercising our bodies, and so physically we're terrible. So what do we do now? Let's invent a virtual reality, the metaverse. In the metaverse, I can be whatever I want to be, provided I pay the fee. I can be strong, I can be smart, although I'm not sure the metaverse can do that just yet. I can be successful because it's just a game after all, it's just an avatar. I can be anything I want to be. We see the lead up to that in online video games right now, massive online games. Young men are fascinated by these, largely young men, let's call it what it is. And why? Because if you're somebody who lives in the real world and you have no status, you don't get any respect, you don't get any attention from the opposite sex, you're earning minimum wage, but you can go home, get online and you can be a god in that game. So where do people pour their energies into? The place where they can feel appreciated, respected, where they feel like they have meaning. And what I'm saying is that the ways in which we're living now, where we're overly comfortable, where we actively avoid any kind of a struggle, where we've become timid, where we become fearful, where again, comfort is our God, that set us up for a life that now becomes impossible to feel fulfilled through. Take that for what you like. Finally, at the end, he says, one proceeds carefully. He's a fool who stumbles over stones or men. So we become so comfortable that any little thing now can cause us to stumble. Anything that gets in our way can cause us to stumble. So paragraph 17, Zarathustra continues, a little poison now and then, that makes pleasant dreams, and much poison in the end for a pleasant death. One still works, for work is entertaining, but one is careful lest the entertainment should assault you. One no longer becomes poor or rich. Both are too burdensome. Who still wants to rule? Who still wants to obey? Both are too burdensome. No shepherd, one herd. Everyone wants the same. Everyone is the same. He who feels differently goes voluntarily into the madhouse. It's relatable, man, that last part. So a little poison now and then, he says. So a little bit of struggle now makes pleasant dreams. A little bit of challenge now helps you to overcome things in life and to live a life that's worthwhile. And much poison in the end for a pleasant death. I don't know, man. I guess there are better and worse ways to die. There are more passive and more explosive ways to do it. Paragraph 18, one still works, so we still go to work, for work is entertaining. We only go to work whenever we find it entertaining, or at least it gives us something to do during the day. But we're careful so that the entertainment doesn't assault you. But we don't want to work too much, because if you work too much, it takes away from comfort. It takes away from the other entertainment, which is at home. Who wants to work a 40-hour work week, or my goodness, who wants to work a 50 or 60-hour work week when the new season of Stranger Things just dropped, or whatever your show is? It's funny as I'm thinking, if this video gets viewed like in 10 years or so, no one's gonna have any idea what I just said with regards to Stranger Things. So pick your favorite mode of entertainment. That's the thing that people want to get home to. In other words, people work not to achieve, not to accomplish anything, but just to provide enough for rent, food, and at that point, that's good enough. And that becomes the motto of the time, good enough. That'll do. Paragraph 19, one no longer becomes poor or rich. Both are just too burdensome. We don't want to be anything down low. We want to kind of like be right in the middle and just stay right there. And that's a real problem today, by the way, with automation, because we see there's almost a need, and to a certain degree, for a universal basic income, because so much of our labor is going to be outsourced, especially as our artificial intelligence abilities improve. And that doesn't just mean work like fast food places. That means like diagnostics in hospitals. That means decision making at the highest corporate levels. CEOs will almost no longer be necessary once we have AI that's good enough to play out all the algorithms and pick the best road, the best options. The legal profession, who needs lawyers when we can feed everything into an artificial intelligence which can make the best decision? So that becomes a problem for us now, because if we can no longer pursue these jobs of either high or low, and we're all just kind of stuck in the middle, and if we're just kind of given a check every month to exist, we might think like, wow, that frees me up to do all the things I want to do. I don't know. What's stopping you from doing all the things you want to do right now with the little time that you do have? It's like, oh, I've only got 5 hours of free time a week. But if you had 10, you'd certainly write that novel, wouldn't you? You wouldn't just plug away at it right now at 5 hours a week the best you could. But if you had those 10 hours, then things would be different. How we can be honest with ourselves enough to know that this would not be different. Who wants to rule? Who still wants to obey? Both are too burdensome, man. It's just too much work on both ends. We don't want that. No shepherd, one herd. So the herd just kind of follows what the herd does. Now, will there be a shepherd? Of course there will be a shepherd. In the last section I was talking about the metaverse. Well, who's in charge of the metaverse? That's the shepherd. The herd, we put on our virtual reality headsets, we jump into the metaverse, and we just veg out. And whoever's setting it up, whoever's running it, whoever's programming it, say hi to your God. Everyone wants the same. Everyone is the same. He who feels differently goes voluntarily into the madhouse. And isn't that what we're finding today? A lot with cancel culture. If you feel a little bit differently from everybody else, well, I mean, now you're kind of shoved into a madhouse. But his point here is that we'll be so socialized that we'll go there voluntarily. You won't even need to tell me, Scanlon, go to the madhouse. I'll be like, dude, I think so differently from everybody. I just don't belong. I'm going to go over there. I don't belong here. Some people you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, that you just don't feel like you're psychologically equipped to live in this world. Nothing seems to make sense. Even going to the supermarket to buy food overwhelms you, and you just don't feel like you belong. It's not that you are stupid and don't understand things. You just feel so alienated from the way that things have become, with all the commercialism, all the people who are staring at their screens all day. And again, this isn't a way of putting down people who stare at their screens and their phones. I'm just saying, if you're not that person, you start to walk around in a world that doesn't even notice you, literally, physically doesn't notice you, because we're staring at screens. We don't see the things that are happening around us. And you are happening around most people. And so if you are walking around and nobody notices you, it's only a matter of time, like I said, with these verses, the metaverse, and there are other competitors as well, where you maybe will continue to exist in a physical world that doesn't exist to anybody else because they're at home plugged in. The difference now is just that people are walking around plugged in rather than at home on their couch covered in Cheeto dust plugged in. I apologize for the variable lighting, by the way. I have motion detector lights in here, so when I sit for too long, the lights turn off. I guess that kind of fits with the life of comfort, right? When we sit for too long, the world shuts off around us. So he continues in paragraph 21, Zarathustra does. Formerly, all the world was insane, say the most refined, and they blink. They are clever and know all that has happened, so there is no end to their mockery. People will still quarrel, but they are soon reconciled. Otherwise, it might spoil their digestion. They have their little pleasures for the day and their little pleasures for the night, but they have a regard for health. We invented happiness, say the last men, and they blink. So formerly, all the world was insane. We hear this all the time, still today, already. So Nietzsche is kind of presaging this. We say, can you believe that, once upon a time, children were allowed to go out by themselves without supervision? And we're talking children as young as 5 years old. I'm one of those children from that generation that was allowed to go out. In fact, if you were alive at any point until the late 90s, early 2000s, you were part of that generation that was allowed to go out and run around by yourself. And we think like, my goodness, but weren't children just constantly being abducted and murdered? And all? No, that was not happening in any greater rate than it happens now. In other words, supervision does not seem to be the thing that interferes with that. But what we do have is we have generations of people now who don't know how to operate on their own. They have to be constantly supervised. We can look back to Piaget and his work where he talked about children playing. And like one of my rules in my life is I never interrupt children when they're playing or even necessarily when they're arguing, because that's how people learn how to work out their problems when they're little kids. If you're constantly interfering with kids when they're playing and even kids when they're arguing, then they learn that that's how problems are solved, by authority figures, not by themselves. They don't learn how to work out interpersonal conflict. Whenever they have a problem with someone, they just look to an authority figure and go, can you solve this for us? And so they never learn how to do that. And that's not just at a societal level. That means that even interpersonally, we can't solve our disagreements. And so because we never learn how to do that, our disagreements become almost existential threats. That person disagrees with me, and I can't have anybody step in, an authority figure, so the authority figure now becomes the herd that I'm a part of. So now I go to my group, and the way that we deal with that is we kick people out of groups. Hence we have cancel culture. We thrash people and we kick them out from the rest of us. That doesn't work, by the way, if you're the individual. That only works if you want to be part of the herd. So formerly, all the world was insane. Can you believe that children used to be able to go out by themselves without being supervised? Can you believe that people used to hold, used to have free speech and would be allowed to say, pretty much anything that they wanted? Can you believe that we used to live in any of these ways? Yeah, the world was so crazy back then. That's what the most refined say, as Nietzsche points out here. That's what the most educated people say in this time. But then they blink. And the whole idea of the blinking means that they're mindless. They do not understand what they're talking about. They're just repeating the things that they've heard. They are clever. They are clever and know all that has happened. We understand everything. We are so refined. Hang on, let me fix my shirt when I say that. By the way, I'm back to wearing a flannel today because a few of you pointed out in my last video that I was wearing a suit and it was a little strange for you. So I can't be as refined as I would have been in my other video. But in my next video, I will be wearing a suit again. So they are clever and know all that has happened. So there's no end to their mockery. People still quarrel, but they're soon reconciled. And we see that today. People will argue. Okay, I see this today as a teacher, where I will have students who will start to argue a point, and they may go back and forth like 2 or 3 times. And so again, I have this standard. I don't interrupt people while they're playing, and argumentation a lot of times for people is playing. And so I just watch how they interact, and maybe 2 or 3 back and forths. One person will eventually say, yeah, but we all have our own points of view. And the other person will go, yeah, everyone's got their own opinions. And then we move on as though that's it. Or someone will say, it is what it is. And then everyone will nod and go, yeah, it is what it is. Therefore, that means that we can't argue about it. Or better yet, somebody will say, look, I'm just saying. And if we're just saying, then that means we're not supposed to argue anymore, I suppose. So, we still argue, but we're quickly reconciled. And then when we do that, we never really improve. We never really get off the ground. That just means like, okay, you're going to have your view, I'm going to have my view, but neither of us is going to grow. We're just going to know not to engage each other again on those levels. And let's really face it, what kinds of things do we argue about? Yeah, there's silly things that we argue about, like, who has better French fries, McDonald's or Burger King, when it's so stupid, because obviously it's McDonald's. Or we argue which is better, In-N-Out or Five Guys, just silly arguments like that, because quite clearly Five Guys is the superior product. You can leave your comments in the comments section below about that. And I bet I'll get more comments about that than I will about the content of Nietzsche's writings. Which, by the way, I welcome. We can argue about In-N-Out and Five Guys down in the comments section. But there's no end to they're quickly reconciled, and there's no end to their mockery, because they're so convinced that they know everything, that because in our modern day we can look back on the past, that we now have the answers to everything. And again, I see this, I think we all see this a lot, where we have people who will take on this moral superiority about how we are today. And again, at the time of recording this video in 2023, January of 2023, we're so convinced, like, my goodness, I can't believe that my parents believed in things like, whatever, like free speech, that we should be able to say whatever we want. What about it when you hurt someone's feelings? I'm a better person. And so therefore, I can say, we need to limit what people say because it hurts people's feelings. And again, I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't. I'm not taking a stance on free speech one way or the other. What I'm saying is it's a hell of a thing to come along all of a sudden in the past couple of years, like literally the past 2 or 3 or 4 years, and say, remember that whole like 250-year past of our that's brought us to where we are today? Yeah, completely wrong. I figured it out in the past 24 hours. I now know. I shouldn't say that. That's just disparaging. I have figured it out in the past couple of years, and they were completely wrong. I don't know, man. Maybe things are the way that they are for a good reason. Maybe it's a bad reason. But do you understand the reason for why things are the way that they are? And oftentimes we won't even think about it. We'll just throw something disparaging at it. Well, yeah, things are the way they are because you were sixherb. You're sexist, Islamophobic, xenophobic, racist, homophobic, or bigoted. Make sure I get that right. SIXHRB. These are the things that we like to throw at people, and we'll even throw transphobic at the end. Are people sexist, Islamophobic, xenophobic, racist, homophobic, bigoted, and transphobic? Yeah, of course. Is that new though? And do you think that we're not today? Of course those things exist today, but to come along and say, well, the whole thing is completely screwed up because of that, but now I have figured out everything. I don't know that it's the people of the past who deserve the mockery in that case. I think it just might be you. And again, you might have figured it out. Maybe you are brilliant and a hyper genius. I guess that would explain why you're watching my videos. But maybe not. Maybe you don't know what you don't know. Maybe there are some reasons for why things are the way that they are, and we should be careful before we start tinkering with systems. But we should definitely be careful before we start asserting our own superiority, because things might be the way they are for a reason. So he says that, sorry to end this thing here, but they're soon reconciled, otherwise they might spoil their digestion. We don't want to argue too much because that might affect my mood. And so I'd rather just, not argue. They have their little pleasures for the day, of course, whatever those things are, television, fast food, whatever. And their little pleasures for the night. I'll leave that to your imagination. But they have a regard for health. And then they end with, "We have invented happiness," says the last man. And they blink because they do not know what happiness truly is. Because happiness does not come from being comfortable. Happiness comes from overcoming yourself to become something better. Happiness comes from fulfilling your responsibilities, which are difficult and challenging. And that doesn't have to necessarily be the responsibilities that society or I put on you. Those are the responsibilities that you adopt for yourself. Friends, family, obligations to yourself, responsibilities to your job. When you fulfill those things, that's what leads to meaning and purpose. It's not me telling you this. This is what all of our research shows. Comfort does not lead to happiness. There go my lights again. I guess that's them telling me to stop sitting here and being so comfortable and to finally move on to the next section. But happiness does not come from comfort. Comfort comes from comfort, and it's nice to be comfortable. But were you born to be comfortable? Were you born to feel nice? Because if feeling nice was the point of life, was the goal of life, well, we would all just be drunk and high all the time. But I don't know, for those of you who grew up in families that had a lot of alcohol and drug abuse, you tell me, does that lead to a happy life? Does the comfort of that person lead to a happy life? For those of you who are struggling with addiction or have overcome it, you tell me, does feeling comfortable, did that lead to a happy life at the time? Or did it just lead to more pain later? I'll leave you to tell the rest of us what that leads to. Right, now the end of Prologue 5, paragraph 25. And here ended the first discourse of Zarathustra, which is also called the Prologue. For at this point, the shouting and delight of the crowd interrupted him. "Give us this last man, O Zarathustra," they called out. "Make us into these last men. Then will we make you a present of the Superman." And, which, not so wrong there. And all the people laughed and clacked their tongues. Zarathustra, however, grew sad and said to his heart, "They don't understand me. I am not the mouth for these ears. Perhaps I have lived too long in the mountains. Too long have I listened to the brooks and trees. Now I speak to them as to the goatherds. Calm is my soul and clear, like the mountains in the morning, but they think I am cold and a mocker with fearful jokes. How now do they look at me and laugh? And while they laugh, they hate me too. There is ice in their laughter." So here in paragraph 25, the crowd is responding to his talk, and they're saying, "Give us this last man, Zarathustra. Make us into these last men." In other words, comfort, delight, lack of struggle, that sounds good to us. And they're saying to him, then we will make you a president of the Superman. So if you live among us and we're the herd, if we're the last men, then at least in terms of being relative to us, that would make you the Superman. So then we both get what we want. And then they all laughed and they clucked their tongues. But notice that Zarathustra here grows sad, and he's weeping in his heart to them. At the beginning of Prologue 5, the crowd is mocking him, and they're laughing at him, and this angers Zarathustra because they're doing it out of stupidity, out of ignorance. They think they know something, but they don't know what they don't know. And so that makes him angry because they're refusing to see. Here they're saying, "Oh, make us into this last man. We'd completely understand where you're coming from. And having said all of that, that sounds good to us. Make us these people." And so this is why his heart grows sad, because again, Zarathustra loves people. Nietzsche loves people. He wants people to be better. He wants us to be better. And so he says to his heart, paragraph 26, they don't understand me. I'm not the mouth for these ears. They don't get it. And I'm not the person to speak to them. Maybe it's my words, maybe it's their ears, but the tune here just doesn't fit the chords, man. I'm not the mouth for these ears. Perhaps I've lived too long in the mountains. Maybe I've just been too separated from people. And this is a danger that we can run into. If you're someone who's out seeking wisdom and you have to seek solitude, you have to disconnect yourself from people around you just to kind of escape their influence. But a problem becomes it becomes a problem when you separate yourself so much that you can no longer relate to the people that you're trying to talk to. I think that this is a problem that we run into as teachers sometimes. We become so disconnected from the culture of the people who we're teaching, our students, that we become unrelatable. And at some point, when you start referring to your students as like, these kids or these students, I think maybe it's time to get out of there. That was some advice that was given to me by my master teacher, Mrs. Hall. And Ellen Hall once said to me exactly that. If you start referring to your students as these kids or these students, it's time to go, rather than like my students. I've never referred to my students as my kids, but I do refer to my students as my students because I want my students to be better. I absolutely do. I want my students to surpass me. I want my students to do way better. And I want you to all say it's because Scanlon inspired me. It's a joke. I want my students to do better and to be better. And I have a personal investment in each and every one of you. And I don't just mean the students who appear in my classroom, I even mean the students who are listening here to these videos. I hope that in some way it blesses you and that you're better for having heard them. But I don't, when we get to a point though, when we can no longer connect with the culture of the people that we're trying to teach, oh, your music sucks, your memes are stupid, I don't understand your humor. Well, then how can you, it's our job as teachers to build that bridge, to connect. And to invite students over that bridge to what we're doing, which is just education. It isn't be more like me. It's just know more than you presently do. And that's all teachers we need to do, is to build a bridge to bring people over to know more than they did when they came into our class. You can't do that if we're constantly at war. It's hard if I sit there and say, your music sucks, your memes are stupid, I don't get your humor, TikTok is trash. Oh, but you should aspire to be more like me. Let me show you this, whatever music that we listen to. We have to be able to connect to people, and the tunes have to fit the chord when we're teaching them. And this isn't just a message to teachers, because you're all teachers. Anybody who's listening to this, you teach people around you something. You're a supervisor at work, or you interact with children, or whatever. To some capacity, you probably do teach people. So you can't have contempt for the people who you're trying to teach. Don't be surprised when they have contempt for you, which a lot of times people are going to begin with that contempt, because we have a natural contempt, seemingly, towards authority figures, to anybody who's trying to teach us something. You don't want to exacerbate that, man. We need to break those things down and build those bridges. Perhaps I've lived too long in the mountains. Maybe I'm too separated from the people now. Maybe I lived up there too long. Too long have I listened to the brooks and trees. Now I speak to them as to the goatherds. Maybe I'm just thrashing them too much. Maybe I just hung out too much with the trees and the rivers. I become too fill in the blank, too something, but I just can't connect with them anymore. Calm is my soul and clear. Nobody's fault. It's just how it turns out. But they think I am cold and a mocker of fearful jokes. Man, they got me wrong, man. They think I'm a mocker. They think I'm just making fun of them and trying to scare them. And he says he's not. He's trying to enlighten them, but they think he's cold. And again, certainly as a teacher, I experienced that, where we come off very differently than how we mean to. Again, none of us sees the world the way that we are. We see the world the way that, none of us sees the world the way that it really is. We see the world the way that we are. None of us sees ourselves the way that we are. The world sees us very differently, and we can't make that confusion with, I see myself this way, therefore everybody else has to see me this way. I care very deeply, and so therefore everybody must see me as someone who cares deeply. Not the case, man. Not the case. And so it's a heartbreaking thing here, where he's bleeding out to the crowd, and they think he's cold. and mocking them and trying to scare them. And now do they look at me and laugh? Now they're laughing again. They get it. They get it. They just think it's silly that I'd want to be anything other than part of the herd, anything other than the last man. And while they laugh, they hate me too. There's ice in their laughter. There's a coldness to it. And that's a difficult thing to thaw. So we understand that Zarathustra comes down from the mountain in Prologue 1, and the monk, the saint up there, is asking him if he's taking his fire down to the village. And when he takes his fire down to the village, it ends here with there being ice in their laughter. There's now this coldness. The exact opposite of what he came to bring is what the audience has produced. And so it wasn't the message. It wasn't the approach. Something was off. So Zarathustra has to figure that out before he moves on, which we're going to see him do. And so this is the end of Prologue 5. With regards to my class, I think this is as far as we're going to go in the prologue. But in terms of YouTube, I plan to finish Prologue 6 through 11. So I want to complete the whole thing. So let me know what you think. If you have any questions, of course, you can send them to me, email them to me through the links here on YouTube, or you can post the comments down below. Otherwise, I'll see you soon, probably with a suit, for Prologue 6. I'll see you soon. Be well.